Now, I will show you how the Republican Party platform has changed since 1970 when wealth inequality started to increase. I focus on anything Second Amendment related to show you the correlation of the changing rhetoric of the NRA and the increasing attention of crime as they both correlate to the change of the Republican Party platform. The 1960s. The word gun, weapon, or Second Amendment is never mentioned in the entire platform. Not one word in this platform has anything to do with a citizen and their right to own a weapon. 1972. To intensify efforts to prevent criminal access to all weapons, including special emphasis on cheap, readily obtainable handguns, retaining primary responsibility at the state level, with such federal law as necessary to enable the states to meet their responsibilities, to safeguard the right of responsible citizens to collect, own, and use firearms for legitimate purposes, including hunting, target shooting, and self-defense. We strongly support efforts of all law enforcement agencies to apprehend and prosecute to the limit of the law all those who use firearms in the commission of crimes. In the 1980s, we believe the right of citizens to keep and bear arms must be preserved. Accordingly, we oppose federal registration of firearms. Mandatory sentences for commission of armed felonies are the most effective means to deter abuse of this right. We therefore support congressional initiatives to remove those provisions of the Gun Control Act of 1968 that do not significantly impact on crime, but serve rather to restrain the law-abiding citizen in his legitimate use of firearms. In 1992, Republicans defend the constitutional right to keep and bear arms. We call for stiff mandatory sentences for those who use firearms in a crime. We note that those who seek to disarm citizens in their homes are the same liberals who tried to disarm our nation during the Cold War and are today seeking to cut our national defense below safe levels. We applaud congressional Republicans for the overturning of the District of Columbia's law blaming firearm manufacturers for street crime. 2000. Help states ensure school safety by letting children in dangerous schools transfer to schools that are safe for learning and by forcefully prosecuting youths who carry or use guns and the adults who provide them. We defend the constitutional right to keep and bear arms, and we affirm the individual responsibility to safely use and store firearms. Because self-defense is a basic human right, we will promote training in their safe uses, especially in federal programs for women and the elderly. A Republican administration will vigorously enforce current gun laws, neglected by the Democrats, especially by prosecuting dangerous offenders identified as felons in instant background checks. Although we support background checks to ensure that guns do not fall into the hands of criminals, we oppose federal licensing of law-abiding gun owners and national gun registration as a violation of the Second Amendment and an invasion of privacy of honest citizens. Through programs like Project Exile, we will hold criminals individually accountable for their actions by strong enforcement of federal and state firearm laws, especially when guns are used in violent or drug-related crimes. Any juvenile who commits any crime while carrying a gun should automatically be detained, not released to someone's custody. In 2012, we uphold the right of individuals to keep and bear arms, a right which antedated the Constitution and was solemnly confirmed by the Second Amendment. We acknowledge, support, and defend the law-abiding citizens' God-given right of self-defense. We call for the protection of such fundamental individual rights recognized in the Supreme Court's decision in District of Columbia versus Heller and McDonald versus Chicago, affirming that right. And we recognize the individual responsibility to safely use and store firearms. This also includes the right to obtain and store ammunition without registration. We support the fundamental right to self-defense wherever a law-abiding citizen has a legal right to be, and we support federal legislation that would expand the exercise of that right by allowing those with state-issued carry permits to carry firearms in any state that issues such permits to its own residents. Gun ownership is responsible citizenship, enabling Americans to defend their homes and communities. We condemn frivolous lawsuits against gun manufacturers and oppose federal licensing or registration of law-abiding gun owners. We oppose legislation that is intended to restrict our Second Amendment rights by limiting the capacity of clips and or magazines, or otherwise restoring the ill-considered Clinton gun ban. We condemn the reckless actions associated with operations known as Fast and Furious, conducted by the Department of Justice, which resulted in the murder of U.S. Border Patrol agent and others on both sides of the border. We applaud the members of the U.S. House of Representatives in holding the current administration's Attorney General in contempt of Congress for his refusal to cooperate with their investigation into that debacle. We oppose the improper collection of firearm sales information in our 4 southern border states, which was imposed without congressional authority. As we go through the Republican Party's platform over the last 30 years, the mention of anything related to weapons and citizens was non-existent. It wasn't until 1972 that we began to see anything Second Amendment or the right to bear arms being mentioned. The word weapons or arms was only in reference to national defense prior to 1972. We also see the rhetoric of criminal prosecution begin to unfold. In 1980, we begin to see the objection to firearm registries and many elements of the Firearm Control Act of 1969 and mandatory sentences. In 1992, they specifically call out liberals, and in 2000, they blame Democrats for not enforcing gun laws. It is here we begin to see some of the same rhetoric the NRA had been using. In 2012, the basic human right is transformed into a God-given right of self-defense. Look at how fast natural law comes into play. In conclusion, by painting a vivid picture of the NRA and its original beginnings, I have shown how the NRA has changed drastically over time into its current form. From the sportsmen to the patriotic defenders of liberty, the NRA's rhetoric has changed dramatically. The majority of these changes fall solely on the takeover of a strong libertarian element in 1972. As the NRA gained strength in membership, it also began flexing its muscles through the legislative system. The NRA's clever marketing has pushed a more extreme libertarian ideology to become the new norm of the Republican Party. In the chart on the screen, we see that the Republican Party began to polarize beginning in the 1970s. Democrats have moved considerably slower from the center when compared to the Republican counterparts. I would say that this movement was heavily influenced by the rhetoric of the NRA. As the NRA began funding to put more Republicans in control, these Republicans also became more libertarian thinking. Over time, the NRA only funded Republican opponents, and when Republicans took the majority of seats, it switched its tactics to spending money against Democratic opponents. Incumbents are hard to unseat, so they have a huge advantage. These new Republicans also favored many of the policies that would have led to the increase of wealth inequality. The Libertarian platform says this about taxation. The Libertarian Party is fundamentally opposed to the use of force to coerce people into doing anything. We think it is inherently wrong and should have no role in a civilized society. Thus, we think that government forcing people to pay taxes is inherently wrong. So, any legislation that cut taxes would undoubtedly be the end goal of a libertarian. Through examples of real NRA advertisements, I have traced the change in the promotion of gun safety and sporting to the anti-government libertarian rhetoric they use now. I have also shown the evolution of the Republican Party platform since 1960. It wasn't until 1972 that the Republican Party's platform included anything about guns, which happens to occur after the change in the NRA's ideology. By contrasting the NRA and wealth inequality pre and after 1960s, I've shown how both these elements have changed on a similar trajectory of each other. While it may be impossible to point the finger towards one thing that undoubtedly has caused the rise of wealth inequality, the NRA's rhetoric and wide-reaching network has a strong correlation to the rise in wealth inequality. The NRA has sold America its love for guns while slowly putting them on the path towards a society in which wealth inequality is personal freedom. If you haven't already noticed, wealth inequality is something I'm incredibly interested in because I really honestly believe that it is one of the central problems. It is one of the central undertakings to most of the problems in America right now. My next project's going to be about defining the term wealth. I don't think a lot of people understand what wealth means. It's more than just the amount of money somebody owns. Money is not the end all towards reaching the top 1%. It's a small fraction of what wealth actually represents. And I think if we had a better understanding of the idea of wealth, then maybe we could get more people to take this issue seriously. Until then, thanks for watching. Please subscribe, like, dislike, don't agree with me, throw some comments down. I'm always open for discussion because in the end, that is what we should be having, is discussion so that we can make progress. Thank you.